Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Momentarily, you'll see our good buddy Owen Siebring joining us on screen. Owen is at the Iowa High School Boys State Basketball Tournament today as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, March 11th. And Owen, I'll bring you on right away. Owen's the sports anchor at Fox 28 and CBS 2. Owen also host of Eye on the Hawks podcast with our good buddy Mitch Fick. We have Mitch on usually during football, and Owen, of course, gets basketball duty. But Owen, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us. And how's everything going today for you?
Oh, excellent. We're in a busy time of year now. We've got Big Ten tournaments to cover. We've got high school state tournaments to cover. We've got wrestling tournaments to be covered. It's a busy time of year for us in March.
Yeah, you just got out of wrestling high school, and now we go to nationals. The Hawkeye women very successfully last week defended their national title back-to-back. The men are going to nationals upcoming after kind of a rough Big Ten tourney. No champions for the Hawkeyes again for the second year in a row for the Hawkeye men, but they do have 8 of their 10 going to nationals, so good on Tom Brandon's guys, and we'll see how nationals works out. But Hawkeye women's and men's basketball, of course, last week you had the State of Iowa girls state championship, so now you're at the boys state championship today and this week. But let's talk Hawkeye women first. 22-10 overall. Tough loss to Ohio State. They had them on down the stretch. Another tight ball game with Ohio State after beating Wisconsin and Michigan State. You were there in Indy. So talk to us about the game, your coverage, and let's talk Hawkeye women going into March Madness as Selection Sunday coming up for men and women, NCAA on Selection Sunday, men first, then the women. But let's talk women first today, Owen.
Yeah, it was a wild tournament. I mean, the Hawkeyes had a good turnout in terms of fans and stuff. Certainly paled in comparison to what we saw last year in Minneapolis. You know, there wasn't going to be quite the turnout as we saw when Caitlin Clark was still on the team. So bound to be a little bit of a dip in attendance by the Hawkeye fan base, but still good showing overall. And I think they did exactly what was expected of them, frankly. I mean, I think that everybody thought that they'd come in, obviously beat Wisconsin. They did that. Even though they were a lower seed than Michigan State, I think everybody knew that that was probably a team that they could beat, and they did that. And I think people thought that they could hang with Ohio State, maybe upset them. And man, you know, even though they didn't get it, I think that they were really kicking themselves afterwards just because they knew that was a game that they could have had. And just a couple things maybe go a little differently. Either they don't call the foul that was called at the one end that allowed Cody McMahon to go to the line and hit those 2 free throws, or if Sid Falter gets a foul call, or if Hannah's shot goes in. I mean, the opportunities were there, and again, as they've been so often in this season, just, you know, millimeters away from pulling an upset or just winning a game in general. It's just like every single game for these Hawkeyes that they lose just seems to be just by that much.
You know, you're so on point there, Owen, with all these 22-10. One possession losses the Hawkeye women have. It's amazing, and you got to get that. You know, I had former Hawkeye great Jess Settles on last week, and Kat McCall's been former Hawkeye great the week before, and you were on a couple of weeks ago, and we've all talked about this. Rebounding, okay, they got that covered pretty well, but turnovers when they get pressed, and that bugaboo jumped up again against Michigan State, they kind of handled it, but Ohio State, they kind of jumped up and bit them again. Good free throw shooting is the last couple games, which is helpful. But then, as you mentioned it, the thing they're lacking with Caitlin Clark, the one-person press break. She's not walking through that door anytime soon, unfortunately. And although she was in the house cheering on her former Hawkeye teammates, but and closers down the stretch. And Sid Falter stepped into that role with 2 huge threes, and that last one to put him up. And then, as you mentioned, but Jeff Settles talked about this. He said, you've got to have your A group refereeing these games. And Owen, you know, you and I talk regularly on this show and off the air. And we're not about to blame officiating for any wins and losses usually. But boy, there have been some questionable calls for this Hawkeye women team down the stretch, as you kind of wince with me off camera. Think a UCLA game, for example, and then this Ohio State game. Oof, some intriguing calls, and some of those things have got to get tightened up for the Hawkeye women. Oh, and interestingly enough, they were an 11th seed in the Big Ten tourney. They're going to be probably a 6th or 7th, 8th at worst in the national, and we'll find out this upcoming Sunday in the national tourney. But let's talk about some of those things, please.
Yeah. I mentioned that to our assistant news director, our producer for the podcast, Mike Howell. I said to him, they're an 11 seed in the Big Ten. They'll probably be a 6th seed. I mean, maybe even at worst a 7th seed in the tournament. How often in any conference in history have you seen a team that low in their conference tournament get as high of a seed in NCAAs? It just seems like the math wouldn't ever work out that it could happen quite that way. But I think we're going to see it with the Hawkeyes this year, that, you know, they just happen to get all those Big Ten losses that dropped them in, but they've had enough quality wins that the NCAA tournament committee seems to really like where they're at. I mean, who knows? They're prone to do anything. They can do whatever they want, but all the experts seem to say, like, this is a 6 seed. I mean, it seems like that's just going to be a huge surprise if they're any lower than that, because from the way they've been playing late in the season, hopefully they look at these close games, even though, yes, we mentioned the officiating in these games that, has really kind of gotten them against UCLA and Ohio State now, has been troublesome for them. But I think the tournament committee sees like, boy, this is a team that can hang with top 10 teams in the country. So we better put them as a higher seed.
Well, and the intriguing thing to your point is we now know what a juggernaut the Big Ten was for women specifically this year, the men too, for that matter. But yeah, they're going to be 6, 7. Like I said, 7 probably at worst, not even an 8, but a 6 or 7. An 11 seed in your conference. Of course, there was a log jam from teams, 6, 7 to 11 with the same record, but tiebreakers and all that kind of good stuff. But would be remiss if we didn't talk about Ava Heiden. This is reminiscent of Addie O'Grady a couple of years ago when she came off the bench when Monica Sonano got in foul trouble, rarely, but once or twice. And Addie came in with huge games. Now you've got you, and then Taylor McCabe, had a tough game going over against Ohio State. That rarely, if ever, happens, where she's coming off hot streaks games before. But the usual starting 5, Lucy Olson just stepping up big, especially down the season, down the stretch. Sita Falter, as I mentioned. Of course, Kylie Fairback with big defensive plays, some big shots she's hit. And then, of course, we got to talk about Addie O'Grady and Hannah Stolke, of course. So there's your starting 5 and 6, bringing in Addie. And then Ava Heiden, once Stolke and Addie got into a little bit of foul trouble or got winded and needed a blow, here comes Ava Heiden with double figures in those last 2 games, Michigan State and Ohio State, when needed, and Owen almost as many points as minutes played for Ava. How about that?
Yeah, that was the tournament that we wanted to see out of her. And I think that I know Jen Jensen has talked about just the development of Ava. It's coming along, and it just hasn't quite gotten to the point yet where she's ready to be a regular contributor in important minutes. But I think this Big Ten tournament finally showed that Ava Heiden, she's ready to be a contributor against good teams. She just played quality minutes against 2 ranked opponents in Michigan State and Ohio State. Like, that girl can play against some of the best teams in the country. And I don't wonder, I mean, the question mark all year has been who Jan puts in the starting lineup, who's going to see minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see Ava Heiden maybe get a starting spot in a first round game, just because, you can put her at the 5, Hannah the 4, and so forth. Like, that's a girl that's good enough that you want her on the court more often than not. And so I wonder if Jan is starting to see like, this Ava, we've got to get her out there a little bit more often.
Well stated. And, a lot of it depends on matchups. As you know, when they played, UCLA in the past, you need some bigger girls, with Lauren Betts being 6'7", and Addie O'Grady, of course, had some inside information on Lauren Betts because they were high school teammates. But,
Yes.
Owen, let's take a quick pause here, and then we'll come back and talk about the men. But we'll talk next week about where the Hawkeye women are going for the big dance and March Madness. So well on their way, my friend. Owen, great coverage from you as always. You ready to stick around and handle segment number 2 with us?
You got it.
You're a good man, my friend. Thank you so much. For Owen Siebring, I'm Dave O'Hara. We'll be back with more Hawkeye in just a few moments.
Hawkeyed is brought to you by BettorEdge, your ultimate social betting marketplace. With no VIG, you're bound to win more on every bet on BettorEdge. Founded by Hawkeye alum James Siles and proud Iowan Greg Kajewski, BettorEdge delivers an unmatched betting experience. Plus, what's not to love when they're committed to supporting charities and children's hospitals near you? Join the action now. Sign up at bettoredge.com/Hawkeyed and get $10 to start winning more today. BettorEdge, where your social betting means your bets go further and you win more.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Soon you'll see our friend Owen Siebring joining us on screen. Owen, of course, Fox 28 and CBS 2 sports anchor, as well as co-host of that fantastic Eye on the Hawks podcast with our good buddy Mitch Fick. And Mitch, of course, joins us during football season. Owen gets basketball duty. Owen, great stuff, great coverage you've had. You're doing a special called Iowa Sports Athletes of the Century, last 25 years in high school and college. It's been interesting who's been on the list. But let's you and I talk Hawkeye men's basketball today. And after first something talking to women, Hawkeye men finished 16-15 overall, so winning record, but only 7-13 in the Big Ten. So they do knock out Nebraska, and it seems to be the pattern here. They knocked them out of football, of bowl eligibility a little over a year ago. Now they knock them out of the Big Ten tourney, but that was survival of the fittest. Whoever won that game on Sunday at Nebraska was going to get in. Hawks got shellacked second half, as you and I have talked about, at home last Thursday, as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, March 11th. They get hammered in the second half. Ended up finishing a close game, making it a 7-point loss, 91-84. But Jeff Settles was on this program last week, former Hawkeye basketball, playing great, and TV basketball analysts said, sometimes that defense optional, well, it reared its ugly head, and they give up over 60 in the second half, Owen, and then lose So close ending score, but still lose the game at home on senior night, senior day. They do come back and bounce back on Sunday. So I'd rather focus on the positive than the negative. So there's your update, folks, on the Michigan State game, which set up a winner take all, Owen, on Sunday. Nebraska wins at home on their senior day. They go to the Big Ten tourney. If Iowa wins, they go and they went and they won. So let's go this way, Owen. First of all, Peyton Sanford, kind of surprised Josh Dix was left off this list, but Peyton Sanford, congratulations to him. Honorable mention all Big Ten by the voters, by press, and by coaches. But Owen, a little surprised Josh Dix was left off that list. Consistency, I guess, probably bit him more than anything else. But Owen Freeman's been out half the year and the rest of the year, so he's not going to be in consideration. But were you surprised by Josh being left off a little bit and just Peyton being the only representative for the Hawks?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that as you say, the consistency was a big part of it, just because there were a lot of nights and a lot of Big Ten opponents that Josh Dix played against where he didn't show up at all. And so I have to think that was the main reason why he was left off. But one thing to remember if you're a fan and you're considering these awards is like, boy, it's hard to get a Big Ten honorable mention right now when you've got 18 teams in the league. That's what's 18 times 5, whatever it is. It's close to 90 something. I'm trying to do back of the napkin math.
It is 90. You are correct.
Okay,
yes.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, so you've got 90 starters in the league who've got a chance at being Big Ten, either first, second, third, honorable mention. And so it's tough to get on that list. Like even in football or any sport right now, if you're a third teamer on the Big Ten all conference list, that's really good. Like you're a really good player. And so, yes, it is unfortunate that Josh Dix gets left off, but it does say a lot about Peyton Sanford, the year he's had on an Iowa team that didn't look very good for a lot of the season. And so, in the old Big Ten, Josh Dix probably does make that list, but in this new Big Ten, he's going to be left out.
Owen, they said there'd be no math on this test. It's sports after all. So you did very well. You kept your socks and shoes on even. So good for you. But hey, folks, Owen is at the Iowa High School Boys State Basketball Tournament. Was kind enough to step aside into the press room there and talk to us for this show today. And you nailed it perfectly. A lot more options for coaches and the media to vote on. So congratulations to Peyton Sanford. But let's get into this, Owen, where you think the Hawks, this first opening round game, if they get by, it's interesting. Hawkeye women played Ohio State last weekend. Hawkeye men, although start off with Ohio State, a 10 and 15 matchup, number 10 Ohio State seed, and Iowa 15, the last seed, last team to get in. If they get by Ohio State, they would play Illinois. And I don't want to get any deeper than that, because then you get into this could happen, that could happen. But suffice to say, they'd have to play or beat probably Michigan State on Sunday. 5 games, 5 wins in 5 days. Let's just stick with the first 2 games, and hopefully they get by Ohio State, and then it would be Illinois. But where do you think this team is going to Indy? And again, that game will be tomorrow as we record this on Tuesday, the 11th of March.
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, it is weird that they're in the exact same shoes as the women were in terms of needing to win 5 games in 5 days to even have a chance at making the NCAA tournament. I would very much be surprised to see this team even get past the first round. As we've seen again and again with this team, is that no lead is safe with the Hawkeyes, because they built a nice lead against Michigan State, and then in the second half that team's lack of defensive abilities reared its ugly head again, and their lack of depth, and I mean, not to no fault of theirs really, because they've just had so many injury issues this year that's taken away the ability for them to have much depth. But once again, their lack of depth and the defense cost them that possibility for an upset win over Michigan State last week. And I feel like that's going to be the story of their Big Ten tournament as well, is that, they might play well for a half or so against Ohio State, but I just have a very hard time seeing them stick with them in that game. And again, with how shorthanded this team is, like, to make a significant run in a postseason, like, just does not seem like it's a possibility at this point.
Owen, if they win the tourney, the Big Ten tourney, that's the only way they're getting into the big dance, the NCAA March Madness. And Fran McCaffrey brought something up, Iowa men's head basketball coach, on his YouTube or radio show last night with Gary Dolphin and Bobby Hansen, that they may not go to the NIT. They might take a bid from what's called the Crown Tournament out in Vegas. And in my next segment, in our sports betting segment with Mike Palm, we're going to talk about that tournament. So they may not be accepting a bid to the NIT. They might go to this Crown Tournament. You and I were talking off the air. Let's bring it on here. It's apparently tied to NIL. The farther along in this tournament you go, the more the prize money gets along. And as you and I joked off the air, and I'll bring it on to you, you know what they say, Owen, when somebody says it's not about the money, there's only one thing it's about: the money. So Hawkeyes could take this tournament bid. It's the top 2 teams from the Power Four conferences that don't go to the big dance or don't accept an NIT bid. And then they take at-large teams, not from mid-majors, but from major conferences, and then they'll fill in at-large bids as they go. 16 teams, it would all be out in Vegas. Interesting how that might change. You know, Hawks had some recent success in the NIT when they didn't make the NCAAs, and we know you got to be above 500 usually to make those tournaments. Hawks at 16 and 15, so even if they lose in the Big Ten tourney, they'll be 500, or if they win a game, lose a game, they'll be game over 500. So all that math, I said there'd be no math, and here we are again talking math again, Owen, darn it. But what are your thoughts on this new Crown tournament that I say new because you and I were talking about this a couple months ago. We barely heard about this, and now it may become a reality, Owen.
Yeah, I'm sure Hawkeye fans honestly would love it, I bet, just because there's direct flights from Cedar Rapids to Las Vegas. So I'm sure they'd enjoy having this chance to go out there rather than, I mean, it certainly is fun to host an NIT game, have yourself one more game to play on your home floor if you're in the NIT. But, you know, they don't want to have to go play whatever, Seton Hall or something in the first round of an NIT game. Like Hawkeye fans, I feel like it'd be tough to get them motivated to go to a game like that. So I imagine that that's probably not what they're looking at right now. And this Crown tournament on Vegas would be just a little bit more fun, both for them and for the fan base to enjoy a trip out there to Vegas and hopefully get a chance to win yourself some NIL money if you can make a deep run there.
Absolutely. Owen, thank you so much for joining us today from the Iowa High School Boys State Basketball Tournament. You're in the press room. You took a brief break from covering games in the high school level, talking some college Hawkeye women's basketball with us, and now Hawkeye men's. We'll catch up with you in a couple weeks and see how this all shakes out and see how the Hawks women and men are doing in basketball. Owen, thanks so much for your great coverage of basketball season. We'll catch up with you very soon.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Dave.
You're very welcome. Thank you. For Owen Siebring, I'm Dave O'Hara. Owen, of course, again, sports anchor and host of the Eye on the Hawks podcast with Sports Anchor at Fox 28 and CBS 2. So for Owen Siebring, I'm Dave O'Hara. We'll be back with more to close out Hawkeye in just a few moments.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman from Mershman Seeds. Substitutions cost you money. Why take their seconds when you can have our first choice? Here's Ben Paper to tell you more about Mershman Power Core Enlist corn.
We are way ahead of Big Seed on this one. This corn has 4 different post-herbicide tolerances, multiple modes of action for above-ground pests, and it is some of the highest yielding corn genetics that are out on the market today.
If you're one of the many that got substituted on your corn hybrid last spring, contact your local Mershman Seeds dealer today and ask them about Power Core Enlist corn. From Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Momentarily, you'll see our good buddy Mike Palm joining us on screen. Mike, like me, a Northeast Iowa native, but doing big things out in Vegas last 20-plus years. VP of Operations at Circa Sportsbook and Circa Sports and Casino, the Golden Gate, and the D. Mike, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us. You got a lot of great events happening at Circa, as always, the hotel, stadium swim, all the cool events. We got March Madness. You got opening day for baseball. You got a great registration. I'm going to mention it briefly on TV. We talk about it big time on the Circa Sportsbook radio show Mike and I do every Wednesday night from 9:30 to 10 on WMT, the blowtorch of Iowa radio, News Radio 600. But Mike, if they go to the Marquee Network, they can sign up for that. It's taking out to the ball game for opening day. Talk briefly about that great special you got going on for baseball. Then we'll talk basketball and college.
Yeah, you've got till Saturday of this week to sign up for it. It's a sweepstakes. We're going to draw a winner, a trip for 2, 500 in airfare to fly out to Vegas, pick you up in the limo, 4 nights in the suite. This is centered around the opening day of baseball, Thursday, March 27th. We'll have Greg Maddox in the Circa Sportsbook in Las Vegas to throw out the official first pitch. We're working on the catcher right now. Eddie Perez, unfortunately, is coaching and couldn't do it. We thought that would be a nice surprise. But anyhow, your own booth in the sports book all day, $500 comp to Barry's Steakhouse at Circa, a $2,000 cabana comp at Stadium Swim. So, and I believe $100 credit at the Legacy Club. So just a terrific whole vacation paid for to come out centered around opening day. And we'll announce that winner, I believe, on the 17th or the 18th of March.
That's fantastic because this show airs throughout the state of Iowa on all 5 Sinclair's TV stations Friday night and early Saturday morning. So, folks, when you see this, register, go to the Marquee Sports Network where the Cubs are. And Mike, that's a great special. But let's you and I talk a little bit about, we talked about it off air, and I mentioned it briefly in the previous segment with Owen Siebring, but let's you and I talk about this Crown basketball tournament. Circa's part of the sponsorship group, but it's put on by Fox TV or Fox Sports, obviously, and AEG Sports Management in Vegas. And as Fran had mentioned last night, Fran McCaffrey during his basketball show, It's intriguing, Mike, because I'm not going to put words in his mouth. He didn't say they would turn down an NIT invitation, but he made it sound very clear that he knew a lot of the principals involved, and he was very happy and impressed to talk about the Crown postseason men's college basketball tournament. A lot of it's tied up, Mike, into NIL, and the farther you advance in the tournament, the more money. Top two teams from the Power Four conferences that don't go to the NIT or the NCAA, right? And then some of the details on this.
Yeah, so it's three conferences that are aligned with it this first year. It's a 16-team tournament that's played the Monday through Sunday, beginning after the Elite Eight games. So it doesn't coincide or start before the NCAA tournament. The three conferences that are signed into it are the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Big East. So this first year, the top two teams from each conference that don't make the Division I NCAA tournament are automatically obligated to it. And then there'll be 10 at large, which could also come from those conferences as well. For instance, we're very close with the program at Boise State. Crown has already reached out to them to say, if you guys don't make the tournament, we'd like, we're interested in inviting you as one of the at-large teams. So they're going to play at Mandalay Bay Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to get down to 4 teams, from 16 down to 4. They'll take Friday night off. They're going to have a big party here at Stadium Swim on Friday night of the teams that are still left and their sponsors. We're going to do some opening events the Sunday night before as well, as being one of the sponsors. Those games are all played on Fox Sports 1. Then on the Saturday of national semifinals that are played in the afternoon and evening, they'll play in the morning before those two games. So the two semifinal games will be on Saturday morning and early afternoon before the Final Four. And then the championship game will be Sunday night, afternoon night. That'll go up against the women's final, which will be on ESPN, ABC, I'm sure. I don't know. They kept moving that earlier because of Caitlin. We'll see what they do with the timing of that for the women's final. But we think it's going to be terrific. Obviously, Iowa might be one of those teams. Just depending on how obviously they're 15th. The Big Ten isn't going to get 13 teams into the big dance. So how are they going to be ranked at the end of the day? There were ties. Obviously, if they win a couple games in the Big Ten tournament, maybe that gets them into that spot, or the committee that's picking the 10 at large chooses them for some reason. So that's a possibility. Look, the NIT attendance. Look at the attendance in the NIT games on campus, and they drew less than 3,000 people on campus. And I'm talking about the Power Four conferences, Power Five last year that had games. Even when you factor those in, they're looking at 2,900. So nobody was interested. Will people want to come out to Vegas with their team? Maybe that they'll draw more interest in that. Obviously, it's going to be on Fox 1, and it'll have more TV coverage. So they'll take a chance with it. The thought is that it's going to probably put the NIT out of business within a couple of years.
It's very, very intriguing you went there, because yes, you're right. Iowa had some recent success going to the championship game in NIT a handful of years ago. But previous, you mentioned, fans had a difficult time turning out to cover Hawkeye Arena. The team had a somewhat difficult time getting up for these games. And the intriguing thing to this, Mike, is, as you mentioned, the more I'm hearing about this Crown tournament, it just really fascinates me, because, as you mentioned, it may make the NIT obsolete for obvious reasons, as you just stated. So I heard about it a couple months ago, as I mentioned to you at a press conference, and Owen Siebring and I brushstroked it. Thank you for the insight, because this puts it in real terms. And yeah, unless the Hawks go on a 5-game win streak and win 5 games in 5 days and win the Big Ten tourney, they're not going to the big dance, March Madness. And then, as you mentioned, they'll have some options. So very intriguing. I know, Mike, during the sports betting segment with Circa, we talked, odds and sports betting and picks of the week and that type of thing. But I wanted to take time this week, and I'm really glad you went here to educate us on this new Crown tournament. I just think what you guys have, what everything's happening in Vegas, and now this new opportunity. And again, NIL is NIL, Mike. The reality is you've got to do what you got to do. And usually when someone says it's not about the money, Mike, guess what it's about? The money. And that's reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're excited about it. We got in as a sponsor. Obviously, MGM is the sponsor. We're using their arenas. And we're excited. And we think, obviously the two companies that are sponsoring are very important in sports. And so we wanted to get involved with that as well. So we're really excited about it. We signed a 3-year commitment with them. So let's see how this first year goes. We're very optimistic.
I love it, Mike. And thank you again for the firsthand insight. This is fantastic stuff. Folks, there he is, Mike Palm, VP of Operations at Circa Sports, Northeast Iowa native, as am I, and most of you watching. And if not, we welcome you in anyway. So Mike, of course, also with Golden Gate Hotels and Casinos and the D in Vegas. Mike, my friend, it's great to see you. I'll talk to you on radio here in just a few minutes. So thank you and great to see you again, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Always appreciate the opportunity to hop on television with you.
Always great to have you. So for Mike Palm, Owen Siebring, I'm Dave O'Hara. Tyler Birch today at Better Edge and BetterEdge.com. Thanks again to Greg Kieski as well, my production partners. So for Hawkeyed, I'm Dave O'Hara. That's all from us. Thanks to all of you.